It's no surprise that 2020 was quite an unconventional year. COVID-19 quickly took control of our lives, and we were immediately forced to pivot to an unusual, unexpected lifestyle. Sports, the staple of entertainment, was brought to a halt on March 11th when the NBA suspended their season until further notice. They were the first league to do so, with the NFL following suit on March 25th. A week later, we were transitioned into official COVID quarantine. Meanwhile, a much larger issue of social justice was forced, very much overdue, to the forefront of our agendas when Ahmaud Arbery was shot on a run on February 23rd, Breonna Taylor was shot by the police in her own home on March 13th, and George Floyd was murdered by police on May 15th. Following these and many, many other horrifying racial injustices, shouts for justice for Black lives erupted all over the country. The pressing task facing reopening businesses and industries was on how to open safely while also ensuring social justice was kept at the forefront of their missions. Leagues were working overtime to achieve this, and the NBA picked back up on July 22nd with the bubble in Orlando. The focus of the bubble, despite the obvious, was to keep Black lives at the core of all conversations. The NBA did this not only through masks, shirts, jerseys, and signage on the court, but also through commentary and press conferences. Players and broadcasters barely talked about basketball, ensuring that justice was the priority. In contrast, when the NFL returned on September 24th, the only support shown by the league for social justice were optional small decals on the rim of players' helmets. This pivotal year reminded us of 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick kneeling in protest in 2016. He spearheaded efforts to use his elevated platform of professional athlete to bring social justice to the forefront.
In 2016, on September 1st, 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick takes a knee before NFL game to protest racial injustice. A few days later, on September 5th, 2016, Obama defends Kaepernick, while Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, publicly denounces the action. This is interesting to note because Goodell is the loudest political voice in the NFL and is directly opposing Kaepernick and not standing in solidarity with him. On September 27, 2016, Trump criticizes Kaepernick and his decision, and on January 1, 2017, it's Kaepernick's last NFL game. Later that year, on September 26, 2017, the Dallas Cowboys and its owner, Jerry Jones, who's a Republican, take a knee, which shows normalization and league-wide acceptance. Our group wanted to explore the apparent relation between politics and sports and pretty much expected to see the NBA mostly give its donations to Democrats, given its response to 2020 movements, and the NFL to donate mostly to the Republican Party, given their lack of action in 2020, and also its past reactions to Kaepernick. But upon, further research and analysis, we realized, especially in 125, that correlation is not causation, and we can't necessarily prove that these two variables will result in an immediate pattern. So we hope to find strong causal relationship between activism and political donations, but because we can't just conflate the two variables, we decided to reframe our research question more along the lines of how the overall makeup of partisan political donations differ between league leadership of the NBA and the NFL, and looking to see if there has been a shift from 2016 to 2020, and rethinking this approach to focus more on patterns and other nuances across years and across leagues, particularly related to NFL and NBA, to gain a better understanding of ownership makeup.
To explore the data which we accessed from 538, we used many of the methods taught in this course. To create data frames for our analysis, the first step was to filter donations that were specifically from NFL and NBA owners to Democrats or Republicans. In the dataset, there was a number of other sports, including MLB, WNBA, NHL, and NASCAR. However, we decided to key in on the basketball and football leagues, given their league responses to social justice movements. Furthermore, our analysis included looking at individual donors and frequencies of dollar amounts, which was not done in the original 538 analysis. As we manipulated the data into usable forms to gain insights and create visualizations, the functions that were most utilized were group by, filter, summarize, and mutate. It is pretty incredible how combining these simple tools can generate powerful results. One obstacle we ran into as we analyzed the donation amounts was the CSV file from 538 had these amounts as characters as opposed to numerical values. To be able to use this data, we had to remove certain characters like the $ and commas, and then convert the column to numerical values. Ultimately, we employed a number of different graph types, including stacked and double bar charts, and a box plot from ggplot to visualize our data. Our adjustment we made to the box plot was to have the y-axis on a logarithmic scale. This allowed the chart to capture outliers and the vast majority of the data at the same time. We were possibly going to explore a regression model to predict the proportion of donations from each party across leagues in 2022. However, due to the fact that the data only went back to 2016, it was concluded that a regression model would potentially result in overfitting and end up doing more harm than good. After constructing the visualizations, here were the main results from our analysis. First, both the NBA and NFL donations were predominantly to Republican organizations, with the NFL being a little more so. Of the NBA donations, nearly 39% were given to Democrats, with 61% given to Republicans. In the NFL, these proportions went to 26% and 74%, respectively. Furthermore, the mean donations from the NBA to Republicans was greater than $19,000, whereas the mean donation for Democrats was just above $6,700. There was a similar discrepancy in the NFL, with mean Republican donations above $17,000 and the mean Democrat donations just above $6,600. Through the box plot, we found an interesting result that across either league, no donation to a Democrat organization was greater than $100,000. However, that was not the case for donations to Republicans, where 4 donations were greater than $100,000 from the NBA and 5 from the NFL. These outliers likely have a major effect on the discrepancies between parties for the mean donation amounts we referenced earlier. Next, we plotted how the proportion of donations allocated to each party changed over time across both leagues. Originally, we were plotting specifically the donation amounts. However, we didn't feel like this was very insightful because political donations are generally higher in presidential election years, so there may be a cyclicity to this plot. As seen in the NBA plot, there is no evident pattern between the proportion of donations. For the NFL plot, there is a marginal decrease in the proportion of Republican donations from 2016 to 2020. However, it's still a very limited data set. To make any conclusions or predictions, more data would be needed. Possibly the most telling result was when we filtered for donations solely from the commissioner of the league. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, made over $22,000 worth of donations to solely Democrat organizations. On the other hand, Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, made predominantly donations to Republicans, with over $13,600 going to these organizations and only $2,700 going to Democrats. As the leader of the entire league, the commissioners have the loudest voice in the room. These differences in personal practices are correlated with the league response to the social justice issues.